Senator Craughwell.
Thank you very much, Cathaoirleach. Minister, back in the 70s when I served, we weren't particularly well paid. I remember the time Tita Hirima was kidnapped. We were out searching the highways and byways, and while our colleague Gardaí sat in restaurants and had their lunch, we ate soggy sandwiches and had cold tea. So morale was not a problem then. We loved what we did. We served the state and we served with pride. And I got to ask you, what has gone wrong? And it's over the last 10, maybe 20 years that it has gone so wrong. Soldiers never joined the Defence Forces for money. They joined Defence Forces because they wanted to serve in uniform. And I cannot understand how we've gotten to a situation where our Navy is at failing point. Our Air Corps is at failing point and our Army is falling apart. I cannot understand how it has gotten to this far. I cannot understand how people don't understand that by reducing numbers, you increase the number of duties a soldier, sailor, or an airman has to do. They come around more frequently. It is certainly not a family-friendly environment now. We talk about pay of entrance. Honestly, you've just spoken about the well-paid soldier and the well-paid junior officer. When we get a severe weather situation, now you give out to me for interrupting you.
I didn't use that phrase.
Well, okay, so I'm paraphrasing, right? But a young soldier on 38 grand a year, you're comparing him to somebody in the public service or some other private service job. But when we get a massive snowstorm and everybody is stuck at home, who's not stuck at home? Your military personnel are not stuck at home. When there's a national disaster, who's not stuck at home? Your military personnel are not at home. When COVID hit, who was not sitting at home? The military were not sitting at home. So don't please compare a normal 9 to 6 role with that of a member of the Defence Forces. I think we're talking about the Working Time Directive. I think it's an absolute scandal that after all these years, nobody can tell me how many hours Joe Murphy serving in Collins Barracks worked last week. And that is unacceptable. And somebody somewhere is responsible for that. And that needs to be sorted out. And, when I see Racco coming in here and PD4, I can understand the frustration they feel. Because their members are hearing very positive stories from these committee meetings, but there is nothing, absolutely nothing positive in it. Now, I swore I wasn't going to speak on the IRG report until after the tribunal.
Well, I'm conscious of the fact that we don't need you to go back on commitments that you've made to yourself.
Fine, Chairman. Anyhow, I need to now. Because the IRG report was based on untested evidence. It was based on submissions made to people for God knows what reason. Certainly, there are serious allegations there that need to be examined. Certainly, anybody in uniform will agree that there were issues, particularly of sexual harassment, rape, and bullying. But we don't know the level yet. And when we talk about transformational change and culture and all of this, can I put it to you, Taoiseach, that transformational change might start with the department and cultural change might start with the department. Cultural change might start with politics and politicians in general. And maybe we might release the coercive control that exists over the Defence Forces, because I believe that they have been hamstrung all along. I want to talk about overseas service. I'm very proud of the members of the Defence Forces who served overseas. I know some of them who served many more terms than 17 in their lives. But would you not accept that our primary role is the defence of the state? The 26 counties of Ireland, the ports, the cables under sea, the sky that we're supposed to protect. Would you not accept that that is our primary role? And our secondary role is our provision of peacekeepers wherever they're wanted in the world. And are we not, somewhere or other, creating an unbalanced view of what the Defence Forces are about? I want to turn to the Air Corps. We visited Baldonnel, and the chairman has made that point. And I think, Chairman, you would agree, when we left Baldonnel, we left depressed by what we saw. We saw PC-9 aircraft, which is the training aircraft, on the ground, unable to fly because they were in need of maintenance. We saw a helicopter, I think we were told it was worth 40 million, that had been sitting in a corner for over a year because there was nobody to maintain it. And then I turn and I open the Irish Times and I see Bristow's, who have just been awarded the SAR contract, celebrating the fact that they're spending 135 million of our money to buy helicopters for the SAR contract that they will keep at the end of the contract, just like CHC will keep the Sikorsky S-92 that we paid for. I think somebody somewhere has got it all wrong in the way we look at things. I agree with my colleague Cathal we need to find a way to reinvigorate and bring in those new helicopters Cathal is talking about. My colleague Deputy Cowan mentioned the drug bust off the southwest coast of Cork. How proud we all were of that drug bust. But can I ask you, Minister, because there was only one helicopter available, if some of those soldiers died, how would we feel about that? And how quick would we be to come forward and say they died because we did not properly resource them, because we could not provide 2 helicopters? My colleague Cathal is a former Special Forces man, and he will tell you that one helicopter provides sniper cover and the other one provides fast roping onto the ship. I think Cathal won't be long, correct me if I'm wrong. But the bottom line on it is, because we managed to do on a shoestring what we should have had the resources to do, we go around the place clapping ourselves on the back. Taoiseach, it is a national embarrassment. It is a national embarrassment. I'm just back from a conference in London on intelligence and security, where when people were talking, they were talking about the west coast of Ireland having only 2 ships available. Now, the bottom line on it is one size does not fit all. If we are not able to recruit people, then we've got to look at everything, including the income that we're offering. Raising the price or raising would you agree with this, raising the salary of an entrant is good. But if the corporal is not earning commensurate above that and the sergeant above that again, there is no incentive to stay on, there is no incentive to seek promotion, there is no incentive to make a career. We are hamstrung with young officers who are short-serving. What about the middle-ranking officers, the captains, the commandants? What about them? We need to look after them. When I served in the 1st Battalion in Galway, the battalion paraded every single morning at 9 o'clock. Every company was on parade with a company commander. Every platoon was on parade with a lieutenant, a sergeant, and 4 corporals. Every single morning we had that. The parade was handed over by the sergeant major to the 2IC and from there to the CO. And it was a sight to behold. I don't think we could do that anywhere today. I don't think we could put a battalion on parade anywhere. So I'm asking you, Taoiseach, despite all the words and everything else, we've got the concept wrong. We're talking about recruitment and retention. We've got to start talking about retention and recruitment. The area of cybersecurity, Taoiseach, I can tell you, and I have the evidence to back it up, we are in serious trouble, like most countries in Europe. I'm glad to see the National Cybersecurity Centre has really stepped up to the pace, but we need far more people involved in cybersecurity. We need far greater oversight of what's happening in cybersecurity. And my final question, we are one of the few parliaments in the world, if not the only one that I'm aware of, that does not have an intelligence committee that can oversee the intelligence operations of the state, security and intelligence. And I would ask you, is that something that Fianna Fáil, your own party, might consider as part of a programme for government next time around? I'll leave it at that, Chairman. Thank you.
Thanks, Chairman. Senator Craughwell raised, I think we need to be careful of our language too, you know. And I'm conscious of this, and I know I said earlier, like, Racco may not appreciate me using culture all of the time, but I do think it's an important issue. And I take your point when you said that I don't take it actually, but you say the IRD was not as untested evidence. But it's not just IRD, it's not just the IRG report itself, Senator. I mean, I had met serving personnel, I'd met former personnel, and there are issues there, particularly in terms of women.
I don't think anybody disagrees.
Yeah, so that doesn't mean then we have to work. And I don't mean this. This is a positive thing, because I think this could be good for everybody.
Don't dispute it.
I think this could be good for everybody, that we do need to work on culture, along with all the other issues. We're not saying other issues don't happen, but culture is important. I think it's important for young people today to have a different psychology than we would have had, than you would have had in the 70s. They look at the world differently. So we do need culture change. And I think that's not just saying it, it has to happen. And it kind of worries me when people kind of sort of have a cut at it when all we said in, for example, that document we published was that above all, or I think we used language to the effect that we wanted to prioritise cultural change. And there was negative commentary about that alone, which really worries me. Kind of, does that mean there's a certain lack of commitment?
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can I just ask you a question?
I just want to articulate that. So,
should we not have just issued a single line saying the IRG found a prima facie case that needs to be investigated? That would have been sufficient, and then let a tribunal test the evidence. That's the way it should have happened.
I don't think you couldn't but comment on what was in the report. It would have been utterly unrealistic to suggest you'd have one sentence and that would be it. That wouldn't have lasted.
Some of the statements I heard in this house were outrageous.
2 minutes in this house or out in the public domain for that matter. You know, we live in a democracy. People are going to comment. People have perspectives on the report, that I acknowledge. But the fundamental recommendation was to have an inquiry, and that's what we're doing. And I take
we all want.
And the public inquiry can contest, as we saw with Charlton, for example. And so on. I think what I was getting to, but I think you should. The Navy isn't. I'm very worried about the strength of the naval services. I don't think the Air Corps is at failing point. I don't think we should be careful the language we use, because we say morale is very low. But if I keep on listening, if I'm working in the Defence Forces, and all I hear every day emanating from Dáil Éireann or everywhere else is the worst place you can work in. It's terrible. It's this. It's that. And it doesn't kind of help my morale.
How many aircraft are on the ground?
Chair, I'm just making the point. Language. You use the phrase like the army is falling apart. It's not falling apart. We have severe issues with recruitment and retention, but it's not falling apart. Like, that's language I personally, what I'm trying to say, Deputy, there's two ways of looking at this. And I've seen this, by the way, in health for 20 years. 25 years in health, A&E has been an issue. Nothing else gets discussed about outcomes and the fact that we've improved dramatically our lifespan, and cardiovascular health is light years away from where it was. Point is, we need some sense of perspective to give people a sense of hope as well on the horizon, and there's movement and there's progress and things are happening.
And 10 years asking for something to give hope.
If it's the case that things are, so we like the C-295s and the strategic airlift when that comes, they're big changes to the aircraft. I think Fairness Deputy Barry said it there earlier, compared to previous times. That is not to say they're still not issues. The biggest issue is recruitment and retention. We will bring in legislation to go up to the 35-year age group. We will do that. It needs primary legislation to do it. I think someone referenced that earlier. It needs primary legislation. We're going to do that. And I think the retention piece is very, very important. All I'm trying to say is, I think somewhere along the line with all the negative, we need positive. I mean, to be honest with you, within 15 hours of what was a successful interdiction or intervention in respect of the drugs, like, there was a race to get this into a negative space.
That's unfair.
It's not.
It is bloody unfair.
It.
You had one goddamn helicopter available,
okay.
And it was an ambulance helicopter you had to take out of service. Don't try now and make us the bad guys here. The bad guys are the people who allowed the organisation have one helicopter available. One helicopter, and they had to take it from Athlone. That's unfair to turn on those of us who criticise it.
It's a military helicopter provided. The point I'm making is it was a very successful operation. And you've queried and you've sort of raised the bar a bit in terms of loss of life and all that. I mean, a very careful assessment was made of the situation by people in authority, in the military authority.
Great people.
Yeah, well, let's trust them then.
Yes.
Let us trust them.
They wouldn't let the state down.
And when I received a recommendation, that that the military and Rangers should board. I did so on the basis of the best military advice, and the Chief of Staff recommended it. And I trust the Chief of Staff in his assessment and the team that was with him. And that's the context here. And they knew what they were dealing with. There are certain situations where you'd prefer more and all of that, but they made a very clear assessment of risk and everything else, and they made the decision to intervene. And the Air Corps were very important in that as well, in terms of the surveillance of that ship. The surveillance really was an aerial one for quite some time. The big issue actually for us coming out of that was the absolute importance of synergising the three services, which is very much a part of the Commission of the Defence Forces. Navy, Air and Army together, Rangers, all working together with the Gardaí and the Revenue. And I think we should do that even better and more. That's the one lesson we take from that intervention. And instead of maybe 3 press releases, there could be 1 in future from the Joint Task Force. That's not the biggest issue in the world, but the biggest issue is that, and it was a very good, successful operation. The evacuation out of Sudan was a very successful, effective operation, on that stage by civil people in the Department of Foreign Affairs, and immediately after that, people were talking about kindness of strangers and all this kind of thing, and we work with Europe in trying to evacuate people from Afghanistan, and we do need strategic lift, yes. We're procuring it. I think we should also be part of European strategic airlift and consortia within Europe to do that. That's the view I have. But I just want to say, I think positives and I'm not saying we shouldn't highlight negative situations, we should. And again, in terms of helicopters, it was servicing and maintenance, and that's recruitment. And there's also issues with those, and we're going to get that right, because that's not, issues around servicing is not satisfactory. So on cybersecurity, I think you've been over harsh. I think we've made great strides in cybersecurity in the last 2 to 3 years. I think the National Centre is good. Our military
I'd like to talk to you privately on that. I don't think we can talk about it in public session.
And look, it's the growth threat. And the Ukrainian war has revealed an enormous growth in cyber attacks.
By the way, we're one of the better ones in Europe.
And collaboration is the key, and that goes back to the consultative forum, because I think those 2 areas of maritime, the sea cables, and we saw with Estonia and Finland, the gas pipeline was sabotaged recently, just last week, as was the cable. And that will mean the private sector with governments, with military, need to cooperate and collaborate, and we need to get their information as to their cables. And it will need a lot of multidisciplinary expertise to deal with the cyber security. But it is coming together. I mean, I've spoken to the Garda Commission, I've spoken to the Chief of Staff, their perspective, and of course the key person in national security, Richard Brown, I think.
Richard Brown, he's doing a great job.
A number of specific questions, to
and Deputy Stanton had specific ones. I gave him the ones on the 2 IPVs. The duty allowance, not specifically a budgetary issue, in the sense that we can deal with that as we are, and there have been negotiations. And I was anxious to retain the tax credit in this year's budget, because the patrol duty allowance, I spoke to people where the tax credit was meant to be the big game changer in recruitment to the naval service. It's important, but it wasn't a game changer. And I think officials on both sides have gone into the weeds on this. And I'm anxious we stand back a bit, make sure whatever we do here is right. And it actually means something in terms of people on ships, but also in terms of their pocket, so to speak, that it's not just a simplification and clarification of an allowance. We're engaging with the Department of Public Expenditure on this. You have a specific naval service seagoing tax credit, that's about €1,500. You have the naval service seagoing service credit. The number of people that we took the seagoing credit is very small. The money is not big.
Yeah, I know.
I'd say at the moment you're looking at 2 million. So this is not huge money, but I think we need to. And I'm not convinced, but I think we need to do it. And as far as I'm concerned, I want to do it in a way that's meaningful.
How soon? Any time?
I would hope very quickly.
Objective.
Yeah.
Of how soon? Are you talking about weeks, months, years?
Well, you see, there is a pay agreement coming.
Okay.
But we could do it very quickly in weeks before that, or we could do it in full sight of it, which is kind of where I'm you know. And the pay agreement is important too from the Defence Forces personnel, I think, as well. And I don't want to do something that doesn't really change the dial at all in terms of... And the issue to me is that we need people on ships. And to incentivise that a bit more. There's 100 on the service commitment scheme in 2021, is it 38 in 2022? Yeah. The numbers are very low, 38 in 2022, yeah. It's very low.
And you wonder why. I mean, it's
knock-ons is a kind of ritual thing we get, but I think it can be done. I'm determined to do it, but I wasn't going to be rushed into it prior to the budget because I felt the tax credit. I wasn't going to sign up for something where you lose the tax credit and people will be asking what was that all about. In terms of the overall, no one's going to be disadvantaged, but you know, well, we don't want people disadvantaged from this. But I also think looking at the existing scheme, we could do more maybe to incentivise and reward, maybe might be a better word, people at sea.
There was a proposal about long service increments as well, long service payments for people to incentivise people to stay on longer. That's been kicked around now since 2019. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, they're part of, you see, everything in that area is all part of the national talks. I mean, the big issue always is knock on to other sectors. So that's a big concern. But I am looking at that. We're looking at seeing what can we do now in terms of the pay agreement. Are there certain areas that we can concentrate and focus on?
We're losing very skilled people every day. And if there's no incentive for them to stay on, as you rightly said, they're going to be actually attracted into the private sector. And they're irreplaceable, some of these people, with the skills they have, especially on the ships. And if you don't have them, you can't put the ships to sea. And we're down to 2. And if it keeps going like this, we won't be able to put any to sea.
Yeah, and I've authorised, and they've employed, CPL, by the way, is the agency. We've asked them in to examine are the recruitment practices and policies that currently are they fit for purpose? Are they optimal? We already had brought in a group on specialised recruitment to see can they get specialised personnel from a technical point of view for the ships. That was initiated some months back at the beginning of the year. Outcome's not great on that in terms of scoring around globally for skilled personnel, and that is key. I mean, it's the skilled personnel that make the ships operational. Yeah. In the engine room and so on, like that is very, very important. And it's a big worry, and so we're putting everything into this to see can we change what's happening there.
Final question I asked, Chairman, was about the psychometric testing. By
the way, could I just say to you as well that we've had a number of people who've come back into the military at a high level with great expertise. That's been interesting, and the quality of those who've come back in has been quite gratifying and very high with particular expertise. Services. Psychometric tests, is it? Yeah. End of the year is the expiry, I think, of the 6 months. We look at that with a view maybe to extend it, and we'll see can we get an outcome as to whether it has made an appreciable difference or not.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're heading towards the conclusion. Senator Craughwell has a final supplementary, very brief question.
Yeah, it's from the veterans generally, right? We do not do military honours. We let our people down all of the time. In 1968, the then Chief of Staff wrote to the Minister for Defence, and he pointed out that we can't give Distinguished Service Medals and Medals for Gallantry to everybody. He said that they could not award medals to those killed in the Niemba ambush because it might look as if it was a handout, and it may bring fresh criticism of how Ireland's operations in the Congo were conducted. So the Niemba guys that got killed, I believe they got the Military Star in 1998, 38 years after they were killed. The families got the Military Star. Jadaville remains a thorn in the side of everybody. The Independent Review Group report is not accepted by anybody. Billy Cadian lies in a grave 4 plots away from a fellow countryman who has a US naval ship named after him. Cadian lost his life saving his colleagues in the Lebanon, and there are countless other
Okay,
stories.
I'm not sure we should open another front.
Well, I'm just asking, what's
time
the
in the
block?
evening.
Will you do something about the blockage they have
I'll
about
ask the Taoiseach to
recognising
briefly
valour?
respond, and it's an issue that we can come back to.
Okay, I just said I'd do it for
In
the
fact,
veterans.
we're to meet some of the interest groups on those issues.
The latter,
In any event,
separately,
separately.
is being examined by the Chief of Staff right now. You may be aware of that. The broader issue is Jadaville has been examined on a number of occasions on different fora, and I'm hearing what the Deputy is saying, and I will have further discussions with the Chief and others on that.
Thank you.
But it's always been the military authorities have gone through this, not the political arm. You know, so.
Okay, can I thank